You weren't just helping them, you were slowly losing your place in the interaction, and no one noticed, not even you. It doesn't start with a decision. There's no moment where you choose to take on someone else's emotional weight. It builds quietly. A message arrives late at night, not urgent, but layered. You read it once, then again. Something feels slightly off, not obvious, but present. You pause, not because you understand everything, but because you register that there's more beneath it. And once you notice that, it becomes hard to ignore, so you respond carefully. Not perfectly, but in a way that keeps the space open. They reply the next day. They don't say you fixed anything, just that it helped, that they felt met. And something in you recognizes that, not as pride, as alignment. This kind of attention has an effect. So you keep using it. You begin to notice more. Shifts in tone, small inconsistencies, things that don't fully line up yet. Not as conclusions, as trajectories. And when those trajectories involve people, another process engages. You don't just observe them, you feel pulled to engage. Slightly. You adjust your tone, your timing, your presence. Not to disappear, but to keep the interaction from collapsing too quickly. At first, it's effortless. You stay in conversations longer. You think about them after they end. Not obsessively, just unfinished. And when something feels unresolved, it becomes harder to leave it as it is. Not because you have to, but because your attention is already connected to it. And this is where it begins to shift. Because the line between noticing something and feeling involved in it is subtle. You start entering situations earlier, before anything is fully expressed, before anything is asked. Not out of pressure, out of readiness. And over time, readiness becomes a pattern. You begin adjusting more often, not dramatically, but consistently. A softer phrasing here, a pause there. Most of the time, it helps. But something changes underneath it. You're no longer just responding to what is happening. You're also responding to what might unfold if nothing is adjusted. And that requires more attention, even if it doesn't feel like effort. Because part of you is always slightly ahead of the moment. At the same time, something else slows down. You don't immediately name what you feel. Not because it isn't there, but because your attention is already engaged outward. So your internal clarity arrives later. After the conversation, after the moment. And for a while, that works. Until it starts to accumulate. Not as overwhelm, as delay. Things you haven't fully processed don't disappear. They wait, and over time, the gap between what you track externally and what you process internally gets wider. You're still present, still attentive, still responsive, but less immediate with yourself. And because your adjustments are small and they're almost invisible, people don't see the calibration, only the result. So from the outside, it looks natural. And in many ways, it is. But it isn't neutral. Because constant adjustment, even subtle, shifts your position inside the interaction. You begin to default to what maintains the exchange before checking what reflects you. Not always, but often enough to matter. And then, a simple question appears. How are you? You pause. Not because there's nothing there, but because your attention doesn't immediately turn inward. It has to shift, and that shift takes longer than expected. In that space, you notice something. You are very practiced at meeting others where they are, less practiced at locating yourself without reference. That's not a flaw. It's a pattern. One built from sensitivity, pattern recognition, and relational awareness working together over time. But any pattern, when used constantly, becomes automatic. And automatic processes don't ask if they're still needed. So something small begins to change. You notice the moment before you adjust, that fraction of a second where you could step in or stay where you are. At first, staying feels unfamiliar, like something might fall apart if you don't intervene. But then, nothing does. The interaction continues. The other person finds their own words. The space holds. That's new information. So you try again. You respond, but without shaping everything in advance. Less regulation, more presence. It's less controlled, but more accurate. And now something shifts. You begin tracking two things at once: the interaction and your position within it. What you feel. What is actually yours? What belongs to the other person? Not perfectly, but earlier. And that changes the balance. You still notice patterns, still sense direction, still care about how things unfold. But you don't automatically convert that into something you need to carry. Sometimes, you let things remain incomplete. Sometimes, you let people hold their own process. And in that space, your position stabilizes. Not as a role, as a presence. You are part of the interaction, not only the one regulating it. You still engage, but not always first, not always ahead. Sometimes, exactly where you are. And that difference, subtle as it is, changes what connection feels like. It's no longer something you maintain alone. It's something that forms between you. And that means it can move without you holding all of it. You don't lose your awareness. You recalibrate it. So it includes you too. Not as an afterthought, as part of the system. And from there, connection stops feeling like something you have to manage and starts feeling like something you can actually be inside. Not perfectly, but fully enough to stay.